Welcome into the first edition of this year's HoosierIllustrated.com postgame basketball wrap-up show. John Alden from In Touch with Indiana Sports and Kyler Staley from HoosierIllustrated.com talking about the Hoosiers basketball recruiting analyst, a jack of all trades, if you will. So we're here talking Indiana, Tennessee, of course. Indiana comes away with the exhibition victory, 66-62 on the road. I would say overall pleasing performance. There's a lot of things you could take away from it, some things that are also disappointing that I'm sure we'll get into, but I'll start with you, Kyler. What was just kind of your initial thoughts on what you saw today in Knoxville?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, it went about as I expected it to. So I think it was pretty sloppy from both teams. I think, this is their very first game of the year, very first exhibition game. First time that both of these teams have even seen a different opponent. They've been battling with each other all summer, throughout the fall. So that first half, pretty ugly, I'd say for the most part.
Very ugly.
The 3-point shooting by both teams was atrocious. Indiana obviously didn't connect on, I think it was 11 3-point attempts that they had. So I know obviously that'll be a big takeaway from a lot of people. So from that first half, but starting with, the first half, Miles Rice immediately made his presence known. And he's the guy. That is the guy. He's going to run the show on that team. And, his explosiveness past the defense, getting through that front line, getting to the basket, being creative, when he gets to that area, making the sharp passes. I mean, he was just a big, big standout. And then the second half rolls around, still a very, very tight game. It was a tight game throughout the, entire game. So, but Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, those guys step up. Indiana starts to knock down some shots. Mackenzie Mbako knock down some shots. Malik Renew as well from the three, which you really, really like to see that. So those guys really stepped up. Miles Rice continued to play very, very well. And then overall, I mean, I thought pretty much everybody that played today played pretty well for the most part. Umar Ballo, just a force on both ends of the floor. So it was ugly. It was ugly in a lot of parts of the day, but the fact that Indiana went on the road to play a team that's probably going to be one of the best teams in the SEC, went in, beat them in their house. I mean, that just shows you that this Indiana team can be legit.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and at least I talked a lot about in the weeks leading up to this. You don't want to overreact to too much because it is an exhibition environment. But at the same time, when you were watching that game, it kind of felt like not only were you watching a real basketball game, but you were watching two teams who are probably going to be competitive in their respective conferences all season long. And not that any of them were anywhere near almost at full strength. That's probably not the best way to word it, even though that would be correct for Indiana. You were without Bryson Tucker, Ja'Kai Newton, as well as one of your key pieces in Trey Galloway. But this is far from two well-oiled machines, of course. And seeing Indiana really just kind of battle their way through a lot of adversity, especially in the second half. For a while, it felt like Indiana, anytime they would creep back up on Tennessee, they would find a way to extend that lead back up to about 4 or 5 points. Indiana would get within a couple of points, and then Tennessee would go back ahead. And then finally, there was a moment where I believe there was a pass out to Malik Renew for a three where Indiana took the lead. And from that point on, I don't believe they ever looked back. And I was really pleased to see the way that the Hoosiers were able to just close out a victory on the road, because doing that in any road environment, especially when you get into Big Ten play later on during the regular season, that's going to be very difficult to do. And seeing them do that at a place like Tennessee, which again is a very tough road environment for the SEC, even though this was an exhibition environment, it should be very exciting to see the way it played out, because we've seen Indiana teams in the past not do well in situations down the stretch like this, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, consistently, playing on the road, and getting wins on the road for this Indiana team. I mean, nearly for the past 10 years, it's been tough to do. I think they've gotten a lot better at doing that since Mike Woodson took over last year, obviously aside. But today, I just feel like they were battling. And you kind of mentioned it a little bit. There were times where you felt Tennessee could, run away with this one. I think they got up the lead to like maybe 6. And most, so you could have easily have seen, Indiana kind of fold here. Okay, it's just an exhibition game. Let's not take this too serious. But you got competitors on this team. And what you really, really saw, and the kind of what we've been talking about all offseason, Indiana's got some dudes. They got a deep, deep bench. And they were out without 3 other guys today, and they were just throwing different people at Tennessee, and I think eventually that caught up to Tennessee. I thought for the most part Tennessee's defense was really, really good. I thought they were just very, very scrappy, very physical on that end, and they forced Indiana in a lot of tough shots. And pretty tough, half court offense, I would say. Indiana struggled there. Obviously, Indiana was a lot better when they were able to get out in transition, and Miles Rice was able to get out there and make plays. But this team was just battling. They were figuring things out. Once they kind of settled in and like kind of spaced it out just a little bit, and they were confident in the shots. The 3-point shooting, yes, it's going to be, kind of a down point here. People are still going to be worried about it. But the fact is that they were shooting the ball, and they were just shooting it and kept shooting it and kept shooting it. And that's what you got to do if you're a team that wants to get off a shooting funk. But I think on the defensive side of the ball, Indiana was also pretty tough on that end. I was really, really impressed, and I think it's getting overlooked a little bit. Really impressed with Canaan Carlisle's defense. Thought he was pretty scrappy on that end. And he was making things difficult for the guy Ziegler, and Miles Rice did a good job on him as well. But Kenzie Mbako looks like he's improving as well on the defensive end. But Indiana really today, they just found ways, and that's what you want to see. And honestly, yes, this game doesn't count for anything. Doesn't really matter, for the fans, for the media, or anything like that. It matters for the coaches. It matters for Mike Woodson and Rick Barnes. But the fact is that Mike Woodson, throughout the season, if Indiana gets into a slump or anything like that, he can be like, hey, you guys went on the road, not at full strength. You guys went on the road and beat one of the best teams in the country. So, this team has it. They have the talent to really go far, and you saw a little bit of that today.
And we talk about this, not overreacting to it, but it is definitely a good indicator because you're not going to get a lot of good non-conference indicators for where this team may stand. I mean, you're going to have the battle for Atlantis, of course, and you're going to have South Carolina early on. But a lot of people are going to reference this game in particular, especially whenever you're thinking about how Indiana may size up some of the opponents that they end up facing in the battle for Atlantis, because you're going to face the likes of Louisville, who's going to have a really good team offensively. And I think that could potentially be a matchup issue for Indiana if they're not able to match that style of offense. Obviously, Tennessee doesn't have somebody like Dalton Connect on their team anymore that's can just light you up from anywhere on the floor. So it will be interesting to see what Indiana will look like whenever they are facing teams that may have more prolific offenses. And real quick, we talked about kind of the 3-point shooting issues for Indiana tonight. Luke Goody, 0 for 5 from 3 points, and then 0 for 5 0 for 5 in total field goals, 0 for 3 from the 3-point line. Miles Rice, he did have a good game. He was 0 for 3 from 3. This could just be chalked up as being in a different environment. You're not used to shooting in Food City Arena or whatever that place is called. They play down in Knoxville now, the Summit. But whenever Indiana will be expected to have better shooting nights, not only against, the lesser caliber of opponents, and then, more so with guys like Tennessee, or teams like Tennessee, I should say, whenever they get rolling into the season. But I think at least I could chalk it up to just being, in early season, and it's not even the season, it's preseason, right? Just don't take too much into account what you saw, I guess, is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Kind of beating around the bush, I feel like, at the moment.
No. I mean, it's totally understandable to be, still a little bit concerned. Obviously the Indiana fan base, very, very passionate, and they've been pleading for good 3-point shooting. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them overreacting, in a certain sense. But I'm with you. I chalk it up as kind of like, it's the first game, you're on a road environment. You're not on your home floor. You're playing against the crowd. You're playing against a different team. So trying to find your rhythm. And you could use Mackenzie Mbako for instance this game. I mean, the first half struggled, I thought, and then once he started to find his rhythm, he was making shots, he was creating, he was taking the defender off the dribble, very, very strong in the lane. Once he was creating and was able to do that, that's when things started really opening up for Indiana. And Luke Goody, I think he's going to be fine. 0-5 today. That's going to be a very rare stat line that you're going to see out of Luke Goody, because that guy's a sniper. He can make shots, and I expect the 3-point shooting to be a lot better from the guards, Carlisle and Rice. And if Renew can be a little bit more consistent, when it comes to shooting threes, if he can knock down 2 a game or somewhere around there, it's really going to open up things for Indiana. But I thought, honestly, a big standout for me was just how versatile these rotations were today. And Mike Woodson was just, being really, really creative. We saw some small ball. We saw that traditional front court lineup a lot of times. And I think a lot of the times, no matter what he was throwing at, it worked in some kind of ways. So, this team, we mentioned it, got a lot of people that you can throw at, a defense, a Tennessee team. They experienced that today. So it's once Indiana just kind of, fine tunes a little bit. The 3-point shooting, I think it's going to improve. So don't panic or anything like that. And I think this team's going to be just fine.
One thing that I think people also recognize is that, at least for the early going with this game, I feel like the pace was very slow. But again, I feel like I've said this a lot, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. Not only is this the first game between good competition with these teams, this isn't even the first real game for either team between Indiana and Tennessee, of course. So it was, as you mentioned at the very beginning of the show, very ugly. But at the same time, I don't want to say what else would you expect, but at the same time, I'm going to toss it back to you. I don't really know. I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record, and I'm getting in my own head for whatever reason.
Well, I think what you're getting at is that, if you were coming into this game as an Indiana fan or media, national media or anything, and you were expecting, a complete product, on the court, or you wanted to see improvements, right off the bat and, whatnot, this wasn't the game for you. This game, I think all the charity exhibition games have been ugly to an extent this year. The Kansas-Arkansas game the other night, if anybody watched that game, it wasn't a perfect product, and you probably got two of the most talented teams in the country, on the floor. So it's just one of those things where you're trying to see what you have in a lot of ways. Mike Woodson's trying to see what he has. Rick Barnes was trying to see what he has, what lineups work, what doesn't work, and just things that you got to improve on. And Mike Woodson's going to look at this and be like, hey, we got to work on our 3-point shooting. We got to start knocking down these shots or whatever, because they shot the ball pretty, from a volume standpoint, I thought they shot enough threes today. Mike Woodson's big on, we can shoot as many threes as we want, but it all comes down to us making them, and they just got to figure out ways to do that. So the lineups are really versatile. This Indiana team's deep, even though they were 3 men, without 3 other guys today. You showed how deep they were. They got a lot of guys you can throw at them. Rebounding, I thought they were really good rebounding. Malik Renew looks a lot better when it comes to rebounding. He was willing to go after the ball, and that's something I really haven't seen out of him his first 2 years. So nearly had a double-double. I think he finished, with 8 rebounds, so 21 points. So the leading scorer for Indiana, and that could be expected throughout the whole season. So if this Indiana team's willing to defend, rebound, make the little things, and then continue to use their talent and just continue to throw different guys, in different types of lineups, rotations, or whatnot, this Indiana team's going to be really, really dangerous when it comes to, Big Ten play.
How do you see some of the rotations kind of changing whenever guys like a Trey Galloway become, more available? Bryson Tucker again eventually finds his way into the lineup. And then if Ja'Kai Newton can get to full strength, how do you see them kind of playing a role? Especially, Trey Galloway will be somebody who is expected to be a big contributor to this team, of course. But then you guys got guys like Bryson Tucker, who are freshmen, and then Ja'Kai Newton, who hasn't played real basketball in a significant period of time. How will that affect, this team as a whole as they move forward into the season?
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting, honestly, because obviously Trey Galloway is going to play. Trey Galloway is going to be the 6th man of this team. He's going to be the first one off the bench once he's back fully healthy and he's ready to play. So I would even expect that Trey Galloway will probably be in the final lineup when it comes to closing out games and things like that. I can see him probably being over Carlisle. He definitely wouldn't be over Rice, but someone like Carlisle, I think maybe at times even Mackenzie Mbaka or whatnot. Unfortunately, it is kind of tough to say, but once you get guys like Bryson Tucker and Trey Galloway back, probably some guys like Anthony Leal, their minutes are probably going to go down. I think Leal did really good in the minutes that he has, and he's always going to be a guy, if there are any injuries or whenever his name's called, he's going to be ready to go. But unfortunately, obviously, if the season continues and, the team's fully healthy, his minutes are going to shrink. Probably the same with Gabe Cupps a little bit. He didn't look too good today. Did make a really strong play to the basket, but, he had 4 fouls. He's just kind of a little rusty. We'll say that. But obviously when these guys come in, the lineups are going to change, but that's a good and a bad thing in a lot of ways. It's good because Mike Woodson has a lot of guys you can throw at, like we mentioned, but probably bad, because some minutes are going to shrink a little bit, and that's unfortunate to see. Unfortunately, my opinion, I don't know how much we're going to see of Ja'Kai Newton this year. I'm just starting to get that feeling. It doesn't seem like he's going to be back at full basketball strength, but that's not to say that he's not going to dress. He's not going to play in spot minutes, but I just don't know at this point in time, considering he has not really played full basketball in the last 2 seasons, what his type of role is going to be.
And it does make you wonder, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but there was a lot of talk this offseason about really just kind of him being a potential X factor for this team. And you don't want to rely on somebody too much, especially when you want them to kind of ease their way back into, playing real basketball and figuring out what their new role is going to be, because they've never played on this team before. So it'll be interesting to see what somebody like Ja'Kai Newton, if he ends up getting any of that playing time if he's able to get back to anywhere near full strength for himself. But overall, this is definitely a good confidence booster going into the season for Indiana. I mean, anytime you can win any road game, it doesn't matter whether or not it's an exhibition, but you do it against a team that's currently in the AP preseason top 12 with Tennessee. They have high expectations for their season, just like Indiana does. And this is a good way to get things off on the right foot. You have one more exhibition with Marion, and then you kick things off for real when it comes to, what is it, SIU Edwardsville on November 6th. So.
Yep.
And so a lot of good things coming up as the season gets rolling around. So before we wrap this thing up, Kyler, what are kind of your closing thoughts on, I mean, this is the first action we've seen for this Indiana basketball team outside of Hoosier hysteria, if you want to count that as real action. Where do you see things going over the next few games from here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the next game is another exhibition game. You're going to be playing, and this is no knock to Marion. I know a lot of those players from watching them throughout their high school careers. It's going to be a lesser opponent in a lot of ways. It's going to be home. It's the first time the home crowd will get to see this team in actual in-game action. So another opportunity to clean up some things. Hopefully you shoot the ball a little bit better on this one. Everyone stays healthy and you don't, overuse anybody. And maybe you get to see Bryson Tucker and Trey Galloway and maybe Ja'Kai Newton play that game. But I think overall this team proved that, we've got the talent. We can compete with anybody. Tennessee is going to be a really, really good team, a really well-coached team. And Indiana went into their house and won today. So you can use that as, a confident booster, like you mentioned it. But at the same time, it was sloppy for, some areas of the game. So you just got to figure that out. Mike Woodson's going to work on his rotation, see what worked. But I will say this team's really, really versatile. There's a lot of things you can throw at a lot of people. So overall, I'm just excited college basketball's back. This is awesome. And Indiana football's rolling. So we are in a really, really good crossover season. And I cannot be more excited.
Yeah, a lot of good things happening with Indiana basketball and football. And I guess while we're talking or mentioning football real quick, big shout out to Drew for the last 2 weeks doing the HoosierIllustrated.com postgame wrap-up shows, once with you, Kyler, and then Dylan Traeger making his debut this past weekend after Indiana knocked off Washington, excuse me. I don't know. I feel very rusty. By the way, if you guys are watching this, I hope most of you have heard me talk before. For some reason, I feel like I'm out of it. I don't know if it's because of the time of day. I've got this weird light coming in on me that I'm not used to. I don't know. It's just a weird environment. Hopefully you don't, scratch me off of your Christmas card list or whatever it may be for this performance, if that's what you want to call it. But Kyler, I appreciate you doing this with me, of course.
Real quick, Indiana was pretty rusty today. Tennessee was pretty rusty. You gotta remember, these media guys, we're rusty too. This is basketball. We're used to, you don't know how many times a day I was tweeting out and I almost did hashtag IUFB just because that's what I'm used to. And that's been what I've been used to the past few months. But hey, everyone's going to be a little rusty. It's going to take us about a month to get back into full swing of things.
2 weeks. I hate taking 2 weeks off from doing post-game shows. I knew I was like, it's been a bit since I've done a live show. I need to not think about that. But anyway, I'm getting a little meta here. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Be sure to check out In Touch with Indiana Sports Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Of course, this week, talking about the Hoosiers on Thursday as well. You guys are putting out an episode this Thursday, correct? I know sometimes
we'll have one out. Yep, we'll have one out.
Okay. Good stuff. And then again, once again, thanks to Drew, thanks to Dylan, and be sure to check out everything else going on at HoosierIllustrated.com, whether it be from Kyler, from Alec, or from the other guys that I mentioned. Be sure to check out everything going on the website. So until tomorrow, for In Touch with Indiana Sports, this has been another edition of the HoosierIllustrated.com post-game wrap-up show.